So I'd like to welcome you all to the 2022 TxDOT Hsip informational meeting for the Dallas and Fort Worth districts. I'm Camille Fountain with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and we have representatives from both districts on the call this afternoon to provide you with information and answer any questions you might have. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the COG's statewide safety initiatives page. Throughout the meeting, if you have any questions, you can please type them in the chat and we'll get to those. So the TxDOT Highway Safety Improvement Program, next slide, Barb. All right, so just a little intro here. The TxDOT Highway Safety Improvement Program is designed for the highway safety projects that eliminate or reduce the number and severity of traffic crashes. It's limited to improvements that address the crash types identified in the Texas Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So before we jump into the presentation, I wanted to do a quick introduction. In the interest of time, we won't go through and have everyone introduce themselves on the call, but we do have record of attendance based on the participant list. But I will let both district staff introduce themselves who are on the call. So we'll go with the Dallas district first. If you would just unmute and just state your name so we know who we have here.
Good afternoon. This is Bahman Afshin, Dallas District Traffic Engineering Supervisor.
Okay, if that's all for Dallas District, Fort Worth.
Good afternoon. This is Teresa Poor. I'm the Director of Transportation Operations for the Fort Worth District.
And I just want to let you know that Brandy Bush is going to be with us later. She has another meeting. They are running late.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we were going to have Brandy give us a quick introduction to the Hsip, and then have, I guess, sorry, Bahman Afshin, if you want to do the introduction, and then we'll have Teresa walk through the slides.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bahman Afshin, and I am the Traffic Engineering Supervisor with Traffic Operation in Dallas District. Thank you all for attending the HSIP 2022 meeting in such a short notice, and looking forward to work with all of you. As most of you know, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, is a core federal aid program with a purpose to achieve a significant reduction in traffic fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads, including non-state-owned roads and roads on tribal land. The HSIP requires a data-driven strategic approach to improve highway safety on all public roads with a focus on performance. This program is federally founded and administered by state. So each city will submit their plan package to your respective district. We will review and then submit to Traffic Safety Division in Austin for final approval. The program, as I mentioned, is a safety-driven approach. So please keep that in mind, that the project that you are submitting needs to reduce or prevent incidents. Deadline for Dallas District is November 30th, and I'm not sure for what district has a deadline the same date or not. And
yes,
you have our contact information. I'm sorry?
I said yes, Fort Worth District has the same date, November 30th, to the district office.
Okay, great. You all have our contact information. Please don't hesitate to contact us for any information you need regarding the HSIP program. Thank you so much. And I'm returning to Ms. Teresa Poor, Traffic Operation Director for Fort Worth District, to go over the 2022 HSIP presentation. Then we go over the questions and answer at the end.
Okay, thank you, Bauman. I appreciate that introduction. So, as I said before, my name is Hsip Guidance, and I'm the Director of Transportation Operations here for the Fort Worth District. And Paula Meyer in our office usually does this presentation, but I'm stepping in for her today. So hopefully I can get through all this. And Bauman, please, y'all over in Dallas, feel free to step in and add anything that you want to as I'm going through my presentation. And I know we'll both be able to try to answer some of the questions at the end. But this afternoon, we just wanted to give you an overview of the call that just came out and talk about a couple of the things that have changed and just to go over some of the requirements. So first of all, like, we've already mentioned and talked about, the HSIP call is based on the emphasis areas from the SHSP. And these are all the areas that I know we're familiar with: the distracted driving, impaired driving, intersection, pedestrian safety, roadway lane departures, speed-related, vulnerable road users, and post-crash care. So these are all the emphasis areas, and that really is what the goal of the program is. We're trying to program projects that reduce crashes in these specific areas. We do have a new Hsip guidance document this year, and this will be posted where it was already mentioned on the COGS website. So you'll be able to have access to this document and read a lot more of the details that I'm talking about today. We do have some new work codes that I'm going to get into. I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between the systemic and the targeted project types that this call has. And then I'll talk a little bit about the GMatch and the focus on letting these projects in fiscal year 26. So next slide, please. So there's two types of projects in this call that are going to be focused on. So the first type are our targeted projects. And these are the types of projects that are really directly related to crash history. These are places, these are parts of the roadway where we have a known crash history. So we also use what's called the SII, the Safety Improvement Index. And this just kind of helps as a guide to rank our projects and to put them in order of importance when the districts are looking at them and figuring out what it is that we need to submit to division. So that's really the targeted projects. Those are the ones where we do have to have the crash data and a crash history on to get something programmed. Our other category of projects are our systemic projects. And systemic projects do not require crash data, but they're really projects that are put into place to correct certain types of crashes. And this is more of a comprehensive method. It's the way I look at it is it's things that make sense to put on the roadway, things that we know are going to prevent crashes. Just some examples are turn lanes at intersections, signal backplates, medium barrier, just things that we know are good practices to put out on the roadway that we know are going to reduce crashes. So those are the two different types of projects that we're focused on in this call. So next slide, please. Okay, so just a little bit more about that SII, the Safety Improvement Index score. And so the way this is calculated, there's a formula in this spreadsheet, and it accounts for the cost of the crashes, crash reduction factors, how much it costs to construct the project, maintenance, service life, volumes. There's a whole lot that goes into this calculation. As I stated, the systemic projects, we don't need to calculate an SII on. Sometimes it's hard to do that because on systemic projects, typically it's down a corridor. So it's a little bit harder to calculate that. It's also okay to leave this blank in your submission if you don't have enough data, and the Traffic Safety Division can help you as locals calculate these scores for your off-system targeted projects. So that's just an overview of this. It's, we put all these factors into the spreadsheet and then it comes out with our SII. And again, this is just something that we use to try to rank the projects and look at them in order of importance. Next slide. Okay, a couple of the different things for this year. First of all, the HSIP documents that are going to be part of the submission and some of the guidance documents, they're all going to be on the TxDOT website. As far as the guidance, the program information, and then your project submittal form. All of that will be available on the TxDOT website. And I'm not sure if COG's going to have that as well on their site where they're going to have this presentation. There are going to be links at the end of this presentation to show you how to get there. But all of that information will be on the TxDOT website. And this year we did add one new work code, and it's work code 150. And it's what that work code is. It's to install permanent dynamic message speed signs that are related to regulatory speeds or advisory speeds. So these are some of those dynamic speed signs that we see it on the roadway. So this is a really good way if you're having a segment of roadway where you've had speed related crashes, or you're having a known problem with speed, which we all know that's a huge problem, these days, is speed. So this is a really, I'm really glad to see this work category being added. So this was a new one this year. And then as far as your average bid prices, we do ask that you use the district averages rather than the statewide bid averages. Next slide. Okay, so as far as the budget and the funding is concerned, so for funding coverage, the money that would be granted to a local would only cover your construction cost. So we just want to make sure that that's understood. It only covers construction. It doesn't cover any kind of environmental permits that might be needed, any kind of right-of-way, any kind of additional funding for design, engineering costs. And the federal funding does cover 90% of the project cost, and the local government match would be 10%. And what is important to know about that federal funding part, that 90%, that is fixed. We cannot go over that amount if somehow there's an overrun down the road in the project. So locals are responsible for any of those costs, above and beyond if we do need more money in the project, because we can't increase that 90%. We can't increase that amount of federal funds in the project. And so something else to talk about with funding is what is called the G-match. And so to help encourage locals to submit projects and do some of these safety projects, there is a possibility of receiving 100% federal funding from the construction dollars, which that would not require the 10% match. And the projects, they have to conform to all of the guidelines, and there are some potentially eligible projects in those categories. And some of those things would be traffic signals, roundabouts, pavement markings, signs, guardrails, a couple of those types of items. So those projects, when they're submitted, we'll have to look at those separately and work with the traffic safety division to see if they are eligible for that G-match. Next slide, please. Okay, this gives y'all an idea of what the breakdown is of what we have been given for fiscal year 2026. So this is what we've been granted per district for off-system targeted or systemic projects. So in the Dallas district, we're looking at 8.2 million, and in the Fort Worth district, we're looking at about 3.4 million. So that's the breakdown of the funding that each district has been given. That's kind of our budget to work with. So like I said, when we get these local projects in, the districts will have to evaluate them and work within that budget to figure out what projects that we're going to submit onto the traffic safety division. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a review of some of the important highlights that we've talked about. So we do have this dedicated funding allocation for off-system and systemic projects in this call. The projects, and this has been, the last couple of years, they now compete on the district-wide level instead of a statewide level. So, the districts have been given these budgets to work with, so we're not competing statewide. We're only really competing with the budget that we have. So that's a good thing. We're able to get more projects through, and it gives us a little bit more control here at the local level. Again, the targeted projects, those have a crash history. The systemic projects do not need a crash history. Any of the off-system projects, they must be let through TxDOT's normal bid process. We do not allow local lets on those types of projects. All the proposals will be submitted through either your local area office or your district office, and we're going to have a list of contacts at the back of this presentation so you know where to send them to. And then, also just please work with, as locals, work with your area office that you typically work with. We'll have some contacts at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, as far as the supporting documentation that you need with your submittal, and these are the documents that I mentioned are going to be on the TxDOT website. So you'll need your HSIP form, a location map of where the project is at, a detailed estimate, typical sections if they're applicable to the type of work that you're doing, of course, intersection layouts. If you're submitting a traffic signal for a project, we have to have those signal warrant forms if you're turning in a signal, your schedule, and then any other supporting documentation that's needed. And, again, all that will be covered in the guidance document and the forms that are available on the TxDOT website. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, as far as estimates are concerned, it's really, really important that your project is scoped appropriately at the beginning and that you have a really good estimate, because like I mentioned, that 90% of federal funding is locked in. And so any overruns are the responsibility of the locals. So, you just have to make sure you're accounting for all of the work when you're putting these estimates together. And of course, only the work types programmed can be part of the safety project. So, once we're in construction, it's, very, very difficult to add any kind of scope or anything to these projects. So you really want to make sure from the beginning that you have your project scoped and that your estimates are really good. And again, we ask that you do use the district average bid prices to develop your estimate. As far as letting is concerned, the projects must let in the fiscal year that's chosen. And for this call, we are focusing on a letting of fiscal year 26. Before these projects are let, before really, they're submitted, you need to make sure that they're viable projects and that any kind of utilities and right-of-way are clear. So you have to consider that in developing, your schedule and your estimates and everything else. So those are just some things to keep in mind with the letting. Next slide, please. Okay, as Bauman mentioned in the introduction, our deadline to turn our projects in is December 31st. So we are asking that locals turn in their projects by November the 30th. That's the deadline for both the Dallas and the Fort Worth district. And then these are the 2 points of contact. The Dallas district, they've developed an email to send everything to. And in the Fort Worth district, we do ask that you send everything to Paula here in the district traffic office. And then she'll work with our area offices to start looking at the projects and everything. But these are going to be your 2 points of contact for submitting your projects. And next slide. Okay, and these are just the links that are going to be found in the presentation. So this will take you to the TxDOT website where all of these documents are going to be found, where your submittal forms, the guidance document, the spreadsheet that will help you calculate your SII. So these links will be available to you in the presentation as well. Okay, and I think we have one more slide maybe. Yeah, and these are just some additional contacts that we have that, if you have other questions in Dallas, Brandy or Bauman and Fort Worth, Paula and Corinne. So all these folks should be able to help answer any other questions as you're going through your process and working on your submittals and working on estimates and submitting them to the district. So these would be the folks you'd need to talk to. And I think that's the last slide. Okay, questions. So now we're on to the questions. So I guess y'all just raise your hand. We'll try to answer anything between Bauman and I think Corinne is on here too. We'll try to answer your questions. And if we're not able to, we will go and find the answers for you and get back with you.
All right, and you can either raise your hands, enter it in the chat. I don't see anything in the chat yet, but just give it a minute or two. All right, Michael, if you can unmute, you can. Michael has a question.
Great, thanks. It's Mike Landrick from the city of Fort Worth. Just want to clarify project implementation. You mentioned it'd be TxDOT let. Does that mean the construction contract would be administered by TxDOT as well? And then the follow-up, so would we expect to do an AFA where the responsibility is design and right away and all that would be our responsibility plus the 10% that we would have to agree to?
Yes, that would be correct. With it being a TxDOT let project, yeah, we would have the construction oversight of the project. So yes, you're correct in what you just said.
Then I guess quick follow-up. So would you guys do the inspection then as well? And would we be expected to I guess contribute to that fee like we would on a lot of other federal projects?
So we would cover the inspection. The projects are either assigned to our local area offices or to our district traffic office, depending on that. The only time we would need your input or help on inspection that I could think of is if being in the city of Fort Worth, if we're doing anything with your signals on those projects, we would
Okay,
ask
sure.
that y'all come and have some input because, they're going to be your signals to maintain at the
maintain,
end of
yeah.
the day. So,
Right.
but yeah, we would take care of all the inspection on the projects.
Okay, thank you.
And Barb, Robert wanted to see if you could go back one slide, I think, to get the contact information. Thanks. And then we have a hand up, Aziz Rahman, if you want to unmute, you can ask your question. If you're speaking, you're still muted. If you were speaking and you thought you were unmuted, we can't hear you. So if you could enter it in the chat, but maybe you were just still muted. All right. So Aziz, I know you were first. I didn't see you unmute. So if there's something, maybe he stepped away or maybe there's something going on right there. Asma, if you want to go ahead and unmute, you can ask your question and we'll come back to you, Aziz.
So for a systemic approach, I see that we don't have to do any SII calculation. So how the projects are prioritized for systemic approach? Like, is it per corridor that we would apply for, or is it like a more of a citywide? I mean, how is those being selected?
So, yes, you're right. For your systemic projects, you don't need an SII, and those projects, they are definitely more corridor wide type projects. I mean, just a few examples that we did in the last call. One of our cities submitted projects to upgrade controllers and backplates along several different corridors in their city. Some other cities are upgrading flashing yellow or upgrading their, the green balls to flashing yellow. So, they're typically more corridor wide. And, again, without it having an SII, yeah, I see what your question is. How do we rank or rate those? And, there's really not a way to do that, but, typically we just look at it, and if it's a, a viable project and we have the budget for those systemic projects, we'll send them through. So I don't know if Bauman, you want to add on to that or anything, but I hope maybe that answered your question.
That is correct. That is just a safety-driven projects that prevent incidents.
So on that one for systemic, can we apply for like multiple corridors? For example, if we want to go ahead and replace backplates or upgrade the backplates, can we do on multiple corridor, or does it have to be in one single corridor?
No, you could do multiple corridors.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, and Aziz, I saw in the chat you're still having technical difficulties, so you can enter your question in the chat. If you're not able to do that, then you can reach out via email to Brandy or Bauman or even myself, and I can get your question over to them if you have issues with the chat also. A couple other questions in the chat. Sorry, my mouse just went away. First, from Curtis Hefner, when submitting an off-system project, is there something different about the process to apply for GMATch?
Hey, that is a good question, and I'm not 100% sure if there is maybe something in the submittal forms. I don't know if Bauman, you're aware of that, if there's something different. Or it
No,
looks
I'm
like
not
maybe,
aware.
yeah. Okay, Corinne has her hand up. Maybe she knows.
GMATch is decided by division. So you submit just normally like any other project, and then they make the decision if GMATch will be applied to a project.
Thanks, Corinne.
Hi, I'm sorry to step in. This is Brandy with the Dallas District. Yeah, so there is a list of GMATch eligible projects that we'll go ahead and send out to you. Camille, I think I've already sent that over to you. But if your project is has the work code associated with an approved GMATch type of work, then it'll be approved for that extra 10%.
Correct, and you did send that to me, Brandy. So after the meeting, everyone, I will be forwarding over to everyone on the call the quick reference guide. So is it included in that document?
Yes. So you'll
Okay,
get
perfect.
it after this call.
Okay. All right, and then Robert Woodbury said one more time, what is the deadline?
November the
deadline is-
30th.
Sorry.
All right, from Charles Taylor, what year are we to use for cost estimates, given that the programming goes out to fiscal year 26?
So my understanding would be that we use our current district statewide bid cost. Is that right, Brandy?
That is correct, actually. Sorry.
It is.
Okay, no,
you're
that's-
fine. Yes.
So yeah, just the current costs.
Right, and
Yeah.
Aziz was able to get his question in. What is the process for on-system projects?
So, and I realize, Aziz, you may not be able to talk on here if you're still having issues with your computer, but I'm thinking your question would be, what if locals want to submit on-system projects? So I'm going to try to answer that question for you, because I think that's what you're asking. So we have a different pot of money for on-system targeted projects that we have. So, you know, if the city does have a problem on a non-system area that you're aware of, you know, we would welcome for you to submit that. But again, we would have to compare that with the ones that we're submitting internally, you know, as far as SII, we'd have to make sure that they're viable projects, that, you know, we don't already have things planned on system. So I think that's what you're asking me. But yeah, the process would be the same, essentially, the forms, the guidelines, the work codes, all of that. So the process is the same, but we would just have to consider our budget for on-system projects to see if those are going to be ones that are selected, because, you know, we here internally, that's what we do. I mean, we look at the on-system problems and the on-system crash data. So, you know, we do want y'all to focus on the off system and try to use these local funds, but I realize y'all may have some areas that you want to consider for on system as well. So I don't know if Brandy, you want to add on to that at all?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. Yep. We will, we definitely welcome your on-system suggestions, because I mean, you may see things locally that we may not always see those problems. So yeah, please go ahead and submit those, and we'll just communicate with you about what we have going on in those areas too. So we're not over programming and doing duplicate work.
All right, and then a question from Chris Dicer. Are we able to send over today's slide presentation? And yes, we are going to link it on our website also. So when I forwarded the quick reference guide, I'll also include a link to where the presentation is found also. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat yet. Don't see any other raised hands. So guess can do a last call for any final questions. All right, one from Curtis Hefner. If a large scope project includes off-system and on-system roadways, in which category should it be submitted?
All right, well, I'm not 100% sure. Brandy, you might have to help, but I mean, I would think we would, the off-system parts would need to be, you know, we would look at the budget that we have for off-system, and we look at the budget we have for on-system, is what I'm thinking, and we would just have to consider both budgets. Is that how we would do that, Brandy?
Yes, we would, you'd have to somehow separate them budget wise, and, you know, have bid items for the on system, bid items for the off system, and submit it that way.
Don't see any other questions. coming through. But everyone sees the contact information here on this slide. And then my contact information comes from the email announcement that went out. So if you have any questions for me, also you can send them and I'll respond. And again, after the meeting, I will send out the quick reference guide along with the CAV data and also a link to the presentation. So with that, this was very short notice, so appreciate everyone for taking their time at the end of the day to attend. So thank you very much, and we'll be in touch. All right, thanks everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thank you.